Therefore sprang there even of one, and him as good as dead, as the stars of the sky in multitude, and as the sand which is by the seashore innumerable. Out of Abraham, a beautiful figure of speech, just means oodles and oodles of people were born out of that relationship. Now these all, verse 13, died in believing. They died according to believing, is an ancient text. Not having received the promises, the fulfillment of the coming of Christ, and the promises that were made to Abraham were not fulfilled. Yet they looked forward, having seen them afar what? Off, and were persuaded of them, and embraced them, and confessed that they were strangers and pilgrims on the earth. Just simply said, well, we're just a-passing through. My treasures are laid up, remember? For they that say such things declare plainly that they seek a country, and truly, if they had been mindful of that country from whence they came out, they might have had opportunity to return. They could have gone back and lived it out here upon earth, eat, drink, and be merry. But they weren't mindful to do that because they had seen the promise ahead and they stayed put on that promise. Now they desire a better country, that is, an heavenly, where God is not ashamed to be called their God, for He, God, hath prepared for them a what? City. Wonder which one? New Jerusalem. Number 17. By believing, Abraham, when he was tried, offered up Isaac. And he that had received the promises offered up his only begotten son. If you have not read our research work on Abraham and Isaac, you ought to read it, because it is one of the great problems of the Old Testament, and I believe that we have given the most accurate solution to it. If I ever learn any more, any of our other people will certainly share it. But it even indicates that at that time Abraham went beyond what God requested of him.
The research work Dr. Wierwille referred to is Studies in Abundant Living, Volume 3, Chapter 8, of Human Sacrifice.
Of whom it was said, verse 18, that in Isaac shall thy seed be what? Called. Accounting that God was able to raise him up even from the dead, from whence also he received him in a figure. By believing, Isaac blessed Jacob and Esau concerning things to come. By believing, Jacob, when he was dying, blessed both the sons of Joseph and worshipped, leaning upon the top of his staff. Beautiful Orientalism. By believing, Joseph, when he died, made mention of the departing of the children of Israel and gave commandments concerning his bones, where they were to be buried. By believing, Moses, when he was born, was hid 3 months by his parents because they saw he was a proper child. They saw that he was a proper child, They saw that he was just a perfect child and would just be that type of child. This they must have seen by revelation. And they were not afraid of the king's commandment, which said all the children, male children, were to be killed. Verse 24. By believing, Moses, when he was come to years, refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter, choosing rather to suffer affliction with the people of God than to enjoy the pleasures of sin for a season, esteeming the reproach of Christ greater riches. Esteeming the reproach is stand for looking for the coming of the Christ, greater riches than all the treasures in Egypt. For he had respect unto the recompense of the reward, which is still future. That Moses was quite a guy, a real fellow. Now, when I see these things written, like here in Hebrews, and I read the records of their life in the Old Testament, I learned so many things about human nature. Now, Moses killed a man, right? One of the Egyptians, if I remember correctly, or was it? Yes. And yet, did God hold this against him? Never once mentioned, when it comes to the believing side here, that he killed someone. But it does set forth that Moses believed God. Verse 27 says, by believing he forsook Egypt, not fearing the wrath of the king, for he endured as seeing him who is what? That's his first coming, right? You and I, as the epistles say, look for his second coming. If Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Moses can so believe God and so walk looking for his first coming, how much more don't we have now to look for his what? See it? Now, Moses could have really ruled Egypt. He had access to the throne of Egypt. And this was in the day when Egypt was a great nation. But he never accepted that. But his training was fabulous. Moses was not some old ignoramus, stupid bird, not a fellow who quit school in 6th grade. He was trained under the court. He was trained in all the sciences, all the arts. That man was an highly educated man. As a matter of fact, he was trained in the king's court, if I remember correctly, for 40 years. And he was 40 years old, wasn't he, when he got in trouble and killed and had to skidoo the country? Then he was out for 40 years. AWOL from Egypt or something. Then he returned to Egypt, and for the next 40 years, he was the leader of the children of Israel. Through believing, verse 28, he kept the Passover and the sprinkling of blood, lest he that destroyed the firstborn should touch them. Boy, now that must have been a real step, where God simply said, just sprinkle the blood on the doorpost, the lintels, and so forth. Eat the flesh of the lamb. And if you'll sprinkle the blood, the old devil won't touch you. And if you eat the flesh of the lamb and you believe it, you won't get sick. 2.5 million people did this. They left Egypt with all the wealth Egypt had. It was given to them. They didn't steal it. They were so tickled to death to get rid of them They brought them all their possessions, their gold, their money, their everything else, and they said, "Get going, fellas. Take her along just as long as we get rid of you." Right. I say to people, move your lips, your throat, your tongue, make the sounds, make the words. All you have to do is do that. Christ is already in there if you've confessed with your mouth the Lord Jesus, believe God raised him from the dead, and you will speak in tongues. And sometimes I find people who have difficulty believing to do this.